and I had such peace.
I felt peaceful, I felt calm, I felt loved, I felt no worry whatsoever.
And I instantly knew this cancer was not going to kill me.
Welcome to Ladies Uplift Circle, the podcast.
Today we'll be speaking with three sisters and their journey with breast cancer, how their similarities and their differences have connected them to become support systems for each other and lean on each other as sisters, as well as sharing their testimonies for us sisters and sisters in the future to have mentors to lean on in any trials that we may have. And as we go through trials, a lot of us may be fearful or think of these trials as scary or something that's negative. But today we're going to hear about the goodness of God and how through this trial, all three sisters found joy through their journey. Hi, sisters. Thank you for joining us today. We can start by Sister Barbara, if you just want to introduce yourself and tell us how you met the church and your journey so far.
My name is Sister Barbara Straccia, and I met the church when I was 15. I originally was born in Georgia, so I did not, grow up in the church or hadn't have even know what anything was about. But my dad worked with someone, and he introduced him to the church. And then my dad and mom loved it. They started bringing us. I was the oldest, and so the kids were from about 5. There's 5 of us, about 5 to 15, and that's where the journey started. And met my husband, married. We had 3 daughters, and I got breast cancer in the year 2000, and I think I got breast cancer right before some of the other ones did. And I've been cancer-free for 23 years now.
That's great. So we'll go Christina next with your introduction.
So I was actually adopted and raised in the church. I was adopted at 6 months old. Both my older sister Cindy and I were both adopted, and then I have 2 younger sisters that were naturally to my parents. And I met my husband when we were 15 at the first World Missionary Conference. That's the year that he was actually baptized at that conference. And we got married when we were 20, and just grew up in the gospel with my husband in Modesto, and was diagnosed at the age of 36 years old the first time.
So. Thank you. And Sister Twin Joe.
I was born and raised in the church. I was adopted also at 6 weeks old to Brother Joe and Sister Rose Melantoni, and 6 other people from my Sunday school class. So there was a total of 7 of us all baptized together. And that many, we kind of grew in the gospel together. We bonded, and those bonds have stayed with us until these days. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2007, and it was a very fast-growing cancer, and I had a mastectomy, and now, 15 years later, cancer has shown up again in my body, and I'm currently going through testing to find out where the primary source is. That has not been located yet. With my breast cancer, there was a lot that I personally went through emotionally, and I believe for all 3 of us, but I'll speak for myself, that I have gone through things in my life that has taught me how to react to situations and how to help others react to situations and what we have to face in life. And I have to say that the 2 sisters that are with me now are on my current journey with me. And there's nobody that I would rather have because they know my emotions. They pray with me. They cry with me. And I cannot imagine being on this journey without them as my support and the brothers and sisters of the church. And I know God has a plan for everything. So as far as I'm concerned, this is another learning process for me.
It's beautiful that knowing that you were going to go through this later on, um, God surrounded you with sisters that could relate to you and also be there to support you, which is beautiful. And like you said, like you couldn't do this without them, and that's a testimony of the friendship you guys have built too. But thank you guys for all giving a little intro about your guys' selves and how you guys all came to the church. There was even just in those intros, there's a lot of similarities between the three of you, and you guys all had been diagnosed with breast cancer and had that connection through that. That kind of brought you guys solidarity as well as a comfort within each other. If any of you guys would like to share kind of how you guys met and connected over your guys' common diagnosis.
How I met, I've known Karen for a long time, but I really didn't know Christina until I saw her at conference, but I didn't really know her or talk to her until the last couple of years. But what happened to kind of bring us together with breast cancer is we were sitting at the tables at the church and eating a meal, and we were sitting there talking with each other. And I don't exactly know how it came up, but we started to talk about the fact, about breast cancer, and it turned out all three of us had it. And so we started to share our experiences. They were all a little different, which is what makes them interesting. And also, I think what maybe appeals to different people, because they may not see something in what you said that hits a chord in their life, but they may see something in the other two, that they get something out of. And my goal in this whole thing is I just hope that the Lord can use me and my experience to help someone else if they ever go through something like this, to realize that you can still do it with joy, that the Lord is right there by your side, and it's not the horrible trial that you think it might be.
Like all of you mentioned, it's really beautiful that God has intentionally connected you and brought you together to bond over things that happened in the past, but also that the three of you can help support each other now through your trials. We would love to hear each of your individual stories of when you got diagnosed with breast cancer, your journey, and your testimonies through that. So we can go ahead and start with Sister Karen Joe.
I was sitting at my desk on a Monday morning, April 16th, 2007, 9:30 in the morning. My doctor called me, and she asked me a couple questions. I had been on some medication, and she said, well, I'm glad that medication is working for you, but you have to stop taking it because you have breast cancer. You're sitting at your desk at work. How do you react? Well, to give a little bit of a history, my father's family, Brother Joe Melantoni, everybody in the Melantoni family has gotten cancer. And all of them who have passed away have all passed away from cancer. So when I heard that on the phone, I think I went into automatic pilot is the only way that I can explain it. And I was able to get off the phone with my doctor, and I went into the restroom, and the first person I called was Brother Alex Gentili, who we just lost. Alex was very, very influential in my life. And when I called him and I said, Alex, I have breast cancer. He stopped everything and he said, let's pray. And he prayed for me over the phone. I can't explain the peace that came over me. And I instantly knew that I was going to have to go through this journey. But this cancer was not going to kill me, which was huge at that point in my life. That was the Monday before an April conference. And that weekend, I went to conference and was anointed. And I remember having long conversations with Sister Barb at that conference. I told her what I was going through, what I was feeling, what they had found. I knew she had already been through it. She was kind of like my mentor in breast cancer. I went on to have a mastectomy, and I went on to have 7 reconstructive surgeries throughout the years. But probably about 5 years ago, Christina and I kind of connected at a conference. I knew her dad very, very well. And she came up and she introduced herself. And it was instantaneous, the bond that we felt. And we talked like we had known each other all our lives. And we talked about our journey through cancer. We talked about being adopted. We really made a strong connection, and that really lasted. And like I said before, it's carrying me through my current journey, which I can't thank God enough for. But I was very fortunate. I almost have a guilt survivor feeling because I didn't have to go through chemo and I didn't have to go through radiation. It's kind of like I almost felt like I cheated cancer because I didn't have to go through the treatments that I've heard of other people going through. And I felt even more blessed that even though I had to go through it, the Lord saw me through it and gave me the strength and gave me peace and saw me through that time.
The fact that you say that you feel that kind of guilt, and maybe it's different than what other people have gone through with cancer. It reminds me of what Sister Barbara said earlier, that for her too, like maybe some things might not touch others, but other things will up for testimony. And I think that's what makes the trio of you three even more so beautiful, or something to be able to connect with, because not all of our testimonies are going to hit every single person that comes across those, but there's something in it that maybe someone else is going to go through it and also isn't going to have to go through chemotherapy or those things, but then they know they can speak with Sister Karen Joe that she didn't have to go through it, but how did she cope with those things that she did have to go through? And same vice versa for everyone else. And the story of the three of you together supports so many of us sisters that might be going through it now, or in years can look back at this and find that support and comfort through your guys' voices and testimonies. So.
Sister Barbara, would you like to share your story and testimony?
Sure. Well, I got pregnant 3 times, and how it happened for me was all 3 times within 3 months after giving birth, I ended up having a growth in my breast. The first time it turned out to be a cyst, they drained it, and that was all that was necessary. The second time, it was a little different. They discovered it, I think, on a routine mammogram. And so, how they call you back and they do the ultrasounds and everything else. And the way that it looked, they really thought I had cancer. So they sent me back in for tests, and then they wanted me to go see a surgeon. Well, in the meantime, I went to church. At the time, I was going to branch one. And so when it came time to have me prayed on, anybody that wanted, I went up there. The same day, there was probably about 7 or 8 of us. It was a very spiritual meeting. You know, God was there. You could feel him. And uh, as I sat down, I remember Brother Peter Scalero prayed on me. And when I got up and I started walking back to my seat, I could feel this burning sensation in the exact spot where I knew the growth was at. And I sat down and I told my husband, I felt this, this burning sensation. At the time, I didn't know that that was God healing me, but that turned out to be exactly what it was, because a couple of days later, I looked and it was gone. It was just gone. I went back to the surgeon. He wanted to do exploratory surgery. I said, oh no, God took care of it. I'm not going to let you do that, because he couldn't find anything. And, but it clearly showed it on all the x-rays and things like that. And then some really different things happened that I wasn't really prepared for, because I had never heard of anything like this happening before. But I was really happy that God had healed me. The growth was gone. I was telling my family, my brothers and sisters. I went to conference. I was telling everybody. I came home and I went into my bedroom, and all of a sudden I had just touched where the growth had been before, not on purpose, but it it was back. So I started crying, and then my husband walks into the bedroom and he saw me crying and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "The growth is back." He said, "But I know it was gone, everything showed it, x-rays, everything." I said, "I'm telling you, it's back." So, he felt where it was, and sure enough, it was back. Well, I did not even know what to make out of that. I had never heard of anything like that happening at all. But John, for some reason, knew what to do. And he said to me, "What have you been doing?" And oddly enough, I knew exactly what he was asking me. And I said to him, "Well, for the past couple weeks, several times a day, I heard this voice in my head, and it said, 'The growth is back. Feel it. It's there.'" And I would, feel it, and it was gone still, and I'd say, "No, it's gone." Well, this time, what I didn't realize is that I was really not using my faith there. I wasn't like confirming that God took it away and I knew it was gone. I was just allowing Satan the opportunity to bring it back. So he said, "Okay, what we need to do is we need to both of us pray and ask God to forgive us for our unbelief, and ask him to take and restore your healing." And so that's what we did. And the next morning when I woke, it was gone again. Now, this time is when I realized that this was going to be a battle. I didn't think that Satan was going to just leave me alone when it had worked the last time. And I'd say for a good 6 months, several times a day, he would tell me the same thing that he told me before. He would say, "Feel it, it's back." And I'd say, "Oh no, I'm not feeling it, and I know it's gone because God has healed me. And you're not going to rob me of anything." But it was hard. It was a hard thing to go through, because you think that you get healed and that's it. And that was how I learned that sometimes you're in a battle, and sometimes it's not that easy, and it requires a lot of effort on your part too. And plus the faith and belief that it uh, for it. So I worked at it, and I answered him every single time he'd say something to me, and I'd say, "No, I'm healed. You know, I'm not going to let you do this again." And finally, he just like gave up, because I think he realized that I wasn't going to step away from my stand, and my belief. And then I had my third child, and just like the other two, I got a lump within 2 or 3 months after that. And what happened this time was I had gone in for a routine mammogram, and that's how they discovered it this time. So they they gave me the name of, an oncologist surgeon. And when I got there, she was looking at all the x-rays, and she came in to see, my husband was with me, John was, and she told me, she says, you have ductal carcinoma in situ. So she said I would need to have a mastectomy. I also then didn't have to go through the chemo or anything, but it was because I chose the mastectomy. Had I had a lumpectomy, I would have had to have it. But I'm really happy that that's how it is. Now, my experience during this time, though, um, was that the Lord didn't heal me this time, and I didn't question that. I don't know why, but I didn't question that. I could, I'd learned from my other experiences that God was taking care of me, and I just had to let him do it. I had to go through all of the tests, the mastectomy, the reconstruction, the, the restoration on the other breast, so that they matched. I had to do all of that. But while he did, something happened to me, like pretty much right at the beginning. It was like God just took my hand and led me up into a different level. I felt I felt peaceful. I felt calm. I felt loved. I felt no worry whatsoever. Nothing happened the way I thought. I thought that my husband and my brothers and sisters and the people at church would all help me through this. I didn't end up needing anybody. I never cried. I was calm and peaceful through the whole thing. And I had such joy that I've never had before or since then. And it just lasted through everything that happened to me. And I learned from that no matter what God chooses to put you through, you can go through it, because if you let him stand right by you, hold your hand, and lead you through it, you can still have the joy of the Lord inside of you. And I felt like instead of people uplifting me, I was able to maybe uplift them, because there was someone who had breast cancer, came up to me, and she said, "You're always so positive and you're saying all these things. I know that it can't be like that. I had breast cancer too. So tell me the truth. Tell me the real thing." And I was stunned, and I said, "Everything I've said is the real thing. This is how it was. And I think that I had to go through this. God could have healed me, but he didn't. But what I learned, the lessons in the Lord that I learned through that, has made a difference in my whole life. Has made a difference in the faith I have in the Lord. It's made a difference in just believing God. And I wouldn't trade those. Any trial I've had since then, I know what to do. I know what worked. I know what I have to do. And so I don't dwell, you know, in depression. I don't seem to ever have that, because I just let God take over. I know I just do what it is that works, and it's changed my life. And this was what I guess what I really wanted to say in this purpose. My testimony is not like Christina's or Karen's, but I think that I still can help people. I think I can call them and talk to them and maybe help them, go through it, and maybe go through it better than they could have by themselves, because I know what God can do, and he doesn't do it for just me. It's not that nothing ever happens to me bad, because that's not true. I know much better how to deal with it.
Well, that's what I was just thinking. Is it kind of reminds me of just in general, you hear a lot of members of the church say, "Oh, this person at work or this person from school told me you're different. Why is it that you're so happy all the time and that like nothing bad ever happens to you? And it's not that. It's not the case that nothing bad ever happened. Sister Barbara, you had breast
Yeah.
cancer, you had multiple lumps, and you did have to go through those trials of Satan literally throwing darts in your mind to try to bring it back, you
Yeah.
know? And it's just the difference is God. He's carrying you through this
Yeah.
experience, and that's why you can have that joy. And it's God. It's God carrying you.
Yeah. But it was one of the greatest gifts that God ever gave me. It really was. You really just don't know what God's doing. And so you just have to trust him.
And I think that right there is what connected us, is we experienced something that we learned what it meant to trust the Lord. I mean, we depended on him 1,000%. And he changed our vision and our perspective on what's important in life. So mine started at 36 years old. And at that age, you don't go through any kind of mammograms, ultrasounds, or anything, because that was for the age of 40. And I had found a lump, and it was close to actually the first April conference that I would have ever experienced. It was like back in 2004. And we had not brought the kids back to see their grandparents. And I knew how important this trip was. So I really didn't understand what was going on with my body. So I just kind of like said, I'll deal with it when I get back. And we took the trip. When I got back, by the time I was seen and gone through all sorts of tests and biopsies, I was then diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma and scared to death because I was a young mom. I had two young, children. Paul and I had been married, you know, 15 years by then, 15, 16 years. And so um, at that time, I just did everything that I was told to do because I was scared. My fear was leaving my kids and my husband behind. And I had to go through mastectomy and chemo. I had to go through 8 months of chemotherapy at that time, and then I was put on medication for 5 years. Um, the one thing in both scenarios, that you think about how the Lord knows what you have to go through. We had just moved to Southern California 3 years prior. When it happened again, we had just moved back to Southern California 3 years prior. If I was in Northern California, I would have had to go to San Francisco to get the care that I have here. So the Lord placed me where I needed to be to get the care. I did not personally, I will tell you, I did not handle the first journey any near close to the second time. I was all about trying to survive, and had gone through a lot to try to prevent this thing from, happening again. I went through a complete hysterectomy at 38 years old. I did like all the preventive measures to try to just survive. 10 years later, after we had moved back here, I went for my first checkup. And I said, hey, can you check this thing that I found in my scar? Not thinking that it would be anything because I had had reconstructive surgery where they had actually taken, I had a surgery called a flap. They had actually taken another part of my body and then did reconstructive surgery. So I thought there's no way because it's a completely different tissue. And it ended up being a reoccurrence of my cancer. And I found out that not only was it in my scar, but it had spread to the internal mammary nodes in my chest. And those are nodes that they can't remove like the other ones, auxiliary nodes and such. So their plan of action was we're going to do radiation this time. So when I found out, my initial response was I was floored and I was furious because I had done all these things that I was supposed to do to make sure that my cancer didn't come back. And then the night after Paul and I had found out the extent of everything that we had to go through, in fact, we went for a second opinion at UCLA. And he said, no, you have to go through this. In fact, There will not be a third time. So basically, you either survive this thing or you're not. So I had a dream that night where I was directed to go out into this like outside area to this tree. And the tree, I have never seen a tree like this before. If anybody's experienced the redwoods before, I mean, it was like that double. And it was enormous. And the root system I can see on the top of the ground. And the roots were going up and were touching the leaves. They were just, as if I was being held inside this tree. And I had such peace. The Lord just took those feelings away of fear and frustration, and I was just overwhelmed. And it was like he was holding me. That's what I felt. And from that point, it was like, okay, it was like he told me, you have to go through this so that I'm going to be with you. And I decided that I was going to try to find the best avenue out of this whole thing. Whatever it was going to be, the Lord gave me peace. And I went through the radiation and found out that the radiation didn't kill the cancer. And so I have been on treatment for the past 9.5 years. I had always been told, you had advanced cancer. In this day and age, they work on your mental health. They're like, we don't want to scare the patient, so we're going to tell them things that make them feel warm and fuzzy. And so you're advanced. And I'm like, okay, whatever that means. It means I still have cancer in my lymph nodes, right? So about 6 months ago, I was kind of looking in my chart. I don't go in my chart for many reasons because I don't want to see my, blood pressure and all the other stuff. But I wanted to see when my doctor had increased my medication because it's due to be increased again. And I saw in my chart by my new oncologist that she had put my stage. Advanced means stage 4. And so I was sitting next to Paul, and I turned my phone and I showed him. And he just looked at me, and I was like, honestly, awestruck, because I am here after 9.5 years. Nothing has changed. Every scan I have, it's the same size, in the same place. It's nowhere else. It's just right there. And it's like the Lord told me, this is your thorn. This is your thing. But I want you to use it for my honor and my glory. I want you to have a smile on your face. I want you to have joy in your heart. I want you to embrace every single day. And, it's like when my kids are going through things, I have to remind them, hey, has he not carried you through things before? And has he not carried us through things before? Look at what the Lord has done. So if he can do it for us and he can do it for this sister and brother over here, why can't he take care of you? You're just as important to him as anybody else. And that's when I found out, what my actual status was. It was like the Lord spoke to me and he said, this isn't for you. I'm not a very I am outspoken, but I'm not one to walk around and like say, hey, I've had cancer for 9.5 years. That's not my life. The Lord is my life. My family is my life. I just happen to have cancer. And he said, you need to tell the brothers and sisters, you need to share this because it's not your miracle. It's theirs because they've been praying for you all these years. And then we connected at conference. There's no coincidence in any of this because I had just read my chart. And I feel this is really something that he wanted us to do because there's so many sisters out there that are going through this right now. And we have a responsibility to say, no matter what stage of this journey that you're in, the Lord doesn't change.
I think it's great too that how good God is, that like Tori mentioned earlier, how you can see the different joy in you guys too, of like you're not crying about it every day, or like, right, you're walking, you look so happy on a daily basis, and that speaks to God that you can be going through the hardest thing, or we can be given the hardest battles, but because of your guys' faith as well, that God is holding you through it. And like you guys said, you probably would never hear that, oh, I have breast cancer and it brings me, like, I found joy in it. And that's something you guys all have. You guys have peace through it, joy through it. And that speaks to how comforting of a God we have, and how strong of a God we have, that we can be going through something so difficult to maybe the outside world, and even within us as well as brothers and sisters. It is a difficult journey, I'm sure. And but there's a comfort you feel because of God.
And it's one thing that when we started talking about this in April, I think the one common denominator was, I wouldn't change this, because it's hard to explain, but the perspective that the Lord's given us on life, when people say don't sweat the small stuff, that's true, because we've learned that life is so precious. So focus on the things that are important, because all the little things, let the Lord take care of that. We tend to, as people, get so wrapped up in things that, are of this earth. And we've learned that there's so many things that are more important. And if the Lord's going to bring the three of us through what we've gone through, and other brothers and sisters, Sister Jerica and what she's gone through, it teaches you so much on, if he's going to take care of this, then he's definitely going to take care of everything else. So
This morning when I woke up, I started praying because I was nervous, and the thought came to me to ask, to ask the Lord to give me the joy that I had before, so that I could maybe somehow get it through to people, so that they could feel what the Lord really did for me. And I just said, Lord, can you just help me? I'm nervous, but could you just help me express so people understand how wonderful you are and what you did for me? And as soon as I said that, my whole being was just filled with the joy, the same exact joy that I felt while I was going through the trial. And it was like a reaffirmation to me that the Lord was just saying, here I am. When you need me, you're going to be here. And I think I'm speaking maybe for all of us, saying, if you ever need us, and if you want to talk to us, if you have something, and you just want, to hear what our experience was, or even to help you, maybe you get breast cancer or something, I think all of us would say, please call us, because we'd be happy to mentor you. I feel like it was the Lord that mentored me. So I'm happy to pass that along.
I think we all feel that way.
God bless you for that. I feel like the three of you, having similar but also different testimonies and currently being in different stages of your diagnoses or others, the joy level from all three of you is still there. And I think that's really nice to see and important to point out that I think in the last episode too, we mentioned, God's not a genie. Just because we ask him to heal us doesn't mean he's going to do it right away or even at all. And that's not the point, really, of being a Christian and being a child of God. It's not the point. The point is that he's going to carry us through it all and make our burdens light, because we will have burdens. So.
when mine returned, and I was, trying to put my finger on things, I I've always tried to dive in to try to figure out where my roots came from, like Sister Karen. But through Ancestry, I was actually able to find my biological family, and I did find out that my biological mother passed away from breast cancer, and that there's many members of her family that have either succumbed to the disease or currently are battling it. So it is a genetic component, and however, I have now established a relationship with my mother's sisters. I got to see them last weekend. Got to see my first cousins. Introduced my daughter to her cousins, and got to see their children. And so, in this trial again, I now have these extra people in my life. So
And it's interesting that your breast cancer is genetic. It's almost like, if you hadn't been brought to the church, maybe you would have never heard about God and wouldn't have had his support through this genetic breast cancer that you would have gotten anyway. So God does work in mysterious and, interesting ways. So,
Yeah, it's amazing because with that also now you have the gift of the church, and through a trial you also have the gift of meeting your biological family. And maybe when you first got it, it's like, of course, I'm sure everyone wonders why something's happening, and like you said, like, for he knows the plans that he has for us, and it all comes together when you look at it as a whole.
Could I share a verse that the Lord gave me last week?
absolutely.
It's in the Book of Mormon in Alma chapter 33, verse 23. And it says, "And now, my brethren, I desire that ye shall plant this word in your hearts, and as it beginneth to swell, even so nourish it by your faith. And behold, it will become a tree, springing up in you unto everlasting life. And then may God grant unto you that your burdens may be light through the joy of his Son. And even all this can ye do if you will. Amen." That just sort of, I don't know, it just hit me, but and that's what it really is. You get the joy, and it's Jesus that's making our burdens light and doing it for you.
Thank you, Sister Barbara, for sharing that. Fits perfectly to what we were talking about now, how God has literally made your burden light, which we can see throughout your lives and currently to this day. So we thank him for that. And I also want to share another scripture that will kind of wrap us up for today. It's in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. It says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." So thank you, sisters, for joining us today. We will be continuing to pray for you, and we just really appreciate that you have been willing to be so vulnerable and share your testimonies with us and with the ladies of the church so that you can be a support to them and continue to build the sisterhood that we have. So we love you, and thank you again. God bless you.